We're Compound Everything, and we talk money, markets, and investing. And this week we're talking about checklists.
Checklists, yeah. So checklists are important. Why do we use checklists?
Mostly because we can't remember everything we want to look into in a company before we invest. So it keeps us on the right path. It keeps us from veering off into the wrong path.
So, quick little story, has nothing to do with investing.
Okay.
But checklists are important because it keeps you from doing stupid things. And things you should remember to do but sometimes don't. So for instance, operating rooms have a checklist.
Right.
I don't know if you knew that or not, but every time you go into the operating room, there's a checklist that people have to fill out. So one thing is sponge counts that they do at the end of an operation. So
Make sure a sponge isn't in the patient.
When a sponge or an instrument isn't in the patient, right? Because it's happened before. That's a pretty stupid mistake that someone sewed up a sponge in there. And same thing, surgeons will sign a limb when they're doing an orthopedic surgery procedure on you. So just to prevent them from making a dumb mistake, they go through checklists.
Right.
So likewise, when you're doing something as complicated as investing, I think a checklist is not a bad idea. It's something to look at just so you don't make a dumb move.
Yeah. I think pilots have checklists as well.
Pilots have checklists. You know, anything where it requires some complex task, I think can be at least reasonably amenable to a checklist. Now, a checklist doesn't substitute for brains.
No.
Right? And so that's the important point for when you're developing your own checklist. We're going to kind of give a little bit of what our checklist is. Right. You can kind of decide what you like from that and cherry pick and whatnot. And our checklist may be different from your checklist.
Right.
And so if you are using a checklist, it doesn't, just because something fulfills all your checklist criteria, it doesn't necessarily make it a good investment or a bad investment. Right. Well, it probably makes it a bad investment. You're trying to weed those things out. But it doesn't make it a good investment necessarily.
I find that checklists are often used for things that aren't complex, but in a situation that is complex. Because what tends to happen in the human brain is when you're doing something complex, you sometimes skip over the things that are easy because you're thinking about so many other things. And I know for pilots, they're doing a million things that they might forget. Something simple in the OR, right? In a complex surgery, the surgeon is just thinking about so many things. A simple thing like, let's make sure all the sponges are out of the
Let's make sure we operate on the right side.
Let's make sure we do the left knee, not the right knee.
Right.
Very simple thing, but because your brain is thinking about so many other things in a complex environment, sometimes we tend to skip the things that should be second nature. Yeah. And most of the time we don't skip those things. But the one time that we do skip those things, it can be
disastrous.
Yeah.
So you're trying to keep yourself from disaster.
Now, one thing I've heard about checklists, and I've never read the book. There is a book on checklists.
I think it's by Atula Gawande.
I think you're right. Yeah. I probably should.
I think it's called the Checklist Manifesto, if I'm remembering right.
Yeah, and it's probably a decent read. So I should probably add that to my TBR. To be read list for 2023.
Fair enough.
But I have heard it said in several different places that a checklist is important, but it can't be too long.
Right.
If you have too many items on the checklist, the purpose of the checklist is lost.
That makes sense.
In the tasks that are on it.
So having said that, why don't we go to our checklist, at least part of our checklist. Now, keep in mind our checklist is always evolving.
Always evolving. So, usually when something bad happens, we're like,
we add things to the checklist. So let's go through our checklist and just kind of why we have these things on our checklist.
A side note is that we actually never used to have a checklist for when to sell.
Yes.
But we've made so many mistakes. I think we've maybe made more mistakes not selling or selling that we decided we need a checklist for when to sell.
And you know what's funny, actually? Maybe we should do another episode on what our sell checklist is. This is kind of our buy checklist. I've seen more checklists developed for, and more guidelines that super investors have given for when to buy than when to sell.
Yes, no one does that.
No one does that. And now, interestingly enough, Manesh Pabrai in his book, The Dondo Investor, he talks about the importance of developing a exit strategy.
Yes.
As soon as you buy, you should have an exit strategy as well. So I think that'll be on our to-do list, is to get a formalized sell checklist.
Right. We kind of have an informal sell checklist.
We have an informal sell checklist.
Only because we've probably lost more money making mistakes on the sell side than we have making mistakes on the buy side.
On the buy side.
Yes.
Now, if any of our viewers, if you have a sell checklist that you've either seen or developed or want to share, we'd be very interested in seeing that.
To leave it in the comments.
Leave it in the comments.
Definitely.
Yeah. So why don't we get into our checklist?
Okay. So I guess the way we start is that we have broad categories. Within those broad categories, we get a little more detailed.
Yeah.
So we start out with Charlie Munger's 4 M's, which are...
So meaning. So does the company mean something to you? Moat. Does the company have a moat or a durable competitive advantage? Management. Is it run by people that we can trust? And is it selling at a margin of safety
Yeah.
that makes the price reasonable?
Yeah.
And be honest with yourself when you're going through the checklist. You know, do I actually understand this company?
Like truly.
Truly. Do I know who the competitors are? You know, so, okay, let's go through it.
So what the first M is meaning. Now, when I first heard that, I was like, what does that mean? I don't know. What it
No pun intended.
Yeah. Essentially what it means is, do you understand it?
Right.
Can you understand it? What is the meaning of the company? But meaning doesn't even totally make sense, but it just works nice, I guess, for Munger to use 4 M's.
For sure.
What do we place in that broad category of meaning on our checklist?
So, for starters, do I actually understand what the company does? So, they have a product. Every company sells either a product or a service. Do I understand what they do?
Yeah.
And for me, I've also added a little bit to my checklist of, can I observe it? Can I observe the sales of this company
And
somehow?
that has evolved.
And that has evolved.
That was not on our checklist, but we've been burnt by that.
Yeah. So, for instance, Apple. I can see that the Apple Store is always busy. I can see that they're constantly developing new products. I can go test those products. I can see whether I like them or don't like them.
You can hear our children and our nieces and nephews say, I would rather
have a no phone than have anything than an Apple iPhone. So, you know, things like that.
Yeah.
Versus another company like an aerospace company that I really don't understand.
Right.
So
it would take a lot more work to
Right.
really be able to watch that company.
Right.
You could, like, to actually be able to watch it in the same way that you could watch Apple, it would take a lot more due diligence and a lot more effort
For sure.
on your part. And we're trying to keep these bars
Low.
6-inch bars, as Buffett says.
Yeah. So likewise, we came across a Tootsie Roll the other day.
Yes.
So-
Actually, we came across it a few years ago.
Yeah, so Tootsie Roll is actually a publicly traded company. They make candy. Well, that's pretty easy to understand. It's a candy making, a confectionery company. So something like that as opposed to Palantir, which makes some sort of software. And I've looked into...
I don't even think they know what they do.
Yeah,
Because I've tried to figure it out, and it's so ambiguous. Even when, like, is it Carp? Is that the name of the CEO?
Yeah.
Even when he talks about it, I'm like,
I don't get
what?
it.
Now, maybe it's just way over my head.
Maybe.
Probably.
Right, probably.
So obviously, I cannot understand that company.
Right. So that's what it means to me as meaning.
Okay.
So meaning is something, is it a business I can understand? The big thing to understand is how they make money.
How they make money.
Right. So that's the first and foremost, because the company is there. You want to invest in a company in order to make money. So
Yes.
how do they make money? Do you understand it? And do they have subsets of the business that, you know, for instance, Tesla. Well, use Tesla. So they're an auto manufacturer. They make cars. But they also have other things that they have ancillary sales. So they sell electricity.
Yep.
You know, they sell software packages such as full self-driving and things like that. So Wi-Fi and other add-ons. So do you understand what they sell? Okay, that is a paramount importance. The other thing I would lump into that is, do I understand the corporate structure? I've come across companies where I don't understand how the company is structured. They have subsidiaries here and subsidiaries there, and you're trying to pull all these things together. Now, granted, maybe if you can understand that, there would be some sort of
an opportunity
there
because a lot of people can't understand that.
Right, there's going to be people like me go, pass.
Yeah, too hard.
So too hard.
Too hard.
You lump it into what Charlie and Warren would call the too hard pile.
Yeah. One thing I'll say about meaning for myself is, it doesn't mean that you have to understand it right now.
Right.
So let's say, because we live in Canada, we're a resource-rich country. So there are a lot of decent companies that are based around resources. There are some lumber companies I'll use.
For sure.
I don't understand a lot about that industry. That doesn't mean, so let's say Resolute Forest Product comes on my radar. And I'm like, you know what? I'm looking at certain metrics and I'm hearing a lot about them. And I'm like, for some reason, I'm drawn to this company.
For sure.
Right? Doesn't mean I can't learn about it.
It's not a very hard business
I can
to
take
look at.
Right, I can take the time, like Lilu says, and just go crazy. Just like hours and hours of research. And after that, if I'm like, I can actually understand this. But you're right, there have been some companies where even when I really wanted to understand it, it was just like, either A, it was really too hard. Like I just couldn't understand it for whatever reason. Or B, it was just something I lost interest in. It's like,
boring.
I don't want to pour, this is just so hard and tedious. I don't want to actually pour my time into this. I'd rather start learning about another company that I enjoy.
Right. So at that point, that would get crossed off
That'd
your
be too hard.
list. Isn't your too hard?
Sometimes you can't understand it. Sometimes there's a reason, because sometimes the management doesn't understand it themselves.
For sure.
Right?
Yeah.
So a lot of times I've looked at companies and I'm like, I don't even really think they know what they're doing.
Yeah.
So it's not that you can't understand, it's that you can't understand it because the management is running it so poorly.
Or when
I've
they're...
heard Buffett say something similar in one of his annual shareholder meetings.
Yeah, so as you read a shareholder letter, do they explain it in a way that you understand? If they don't, pass.
Can they answer questions by analysts in the quarterly calls? A lot of times they don't.
Right.
They say a lot of stuff and you're like, oh wow, they answered that. And then you go and re-listen, you're like, they did not answer that. And the reason is they probably actually don't know themselves.
Yeah. Well, that goes kind of to our third point of management, but we'll get there. We'll get there.
All of the M's kind of weave in and out of each other.
For
and
sure.
It makes sense because a company is a living organism.
Yep.
And
Absolutely.
that's how I view it. I view a company as a living organism. And so obviously all of these things weave in and out of each other.
Yeah. So under meaning, we have, do we understand it? Are we capable of understanding it? If we don't understand it, or do we want to understand it? And then both in form and in the business. So in the form that the company's structured in and in the actual business itself. Do I understand the business that they are playing in?
Yeah.
Another thing in meaning is, do you know the competitors? That's important.
That's very important. One competitor can take out a business.
Right, because there's very few businesses that operate as a monopoly.
Yeah.
I mean, if you find one, great, but a lot of them are going to operate with competition. So can you understand their competitors? Can you understand where they are relative to their competitors? That kind of digresses into the next point, which is moat.
And it's interesting that you bring up competitors, because how many companies can we think of just sitting here that were at the top of their game and then they lost it? And how many investors invested in them thinking that they were going to be a really great, safe, not even a great investment, a safe investment, but because they didn't do enough diligence and look into their competitors and how well their competitors were doing to them, they lost on their investment. I think it was Carl Icahn who said Blockbuster was his worst investment
I was
ever.
thinking exactly that.
Yeah.
And so the point being is, as an investor, can you see not only where your competition lies within the industry, but also what are threats to the industry?
Right. And Buffett with Dexter Shoes.
Right.
He did not see the competitors. Dexter might have been a good company. Blockbuster was a good company.
Yeah.
But if a competitor is coming in,
Yeah.
they might not stay that great company for very long.
In order to truly understand the company, you have to understand where the potential threats to the business lie. And in Blockbuster's case, the threat was the internet.
Right. Yeah.
No question.
Yeah. And you really have to treat it, it's almost like a territorial war.
Yeah.
Like you have to know your enemy. Investing is cutthroat, and you have to know your enemy. And business is cutthroat, and these competitors are coming for you.
Yeah.
And number two is often a little more driven than number one, because they don't want to be number two.
Oh, no question. Let's move on to moats. So what do you look for on your checklist for moats?
Okay, so obviously I'm going to follow Buffett and Munger on this one. And a moat, for anyone listening, just means a durable competitive advantage. And we say the word moat because it's the same as having a moat around the castle. The better the moat, the more protected the castle. So we want that moat to be very protective for the company.
Yeah.
So the moats we may as well discuss the different types of moats.
Okay.
And our thinking has also evolved on this.
Sure. Okay.
I think as companies have come and gone, we've seen that there were other moats that have come up over the years, right? So what are the moats? Let's see if I can do them by memory.
Okay.
All right. So there's secrets and patents. So does the company have patents that are, like Coke would be a good example. They obviously have a secret
formula recipe,
right? Yeah. And then for patents, do they have patents that other competitors can't actually even come in and do what they're doing because they're protected by their patent?
Yep.
So that's secret and some patents. There is a low-cost producer. So can they produce their product for such a low cost in comparison to other companies that the other companies just cannot keep up with them?
They compete on price.
They compete on price. There's toll bridge. So an easy one for that is
railroads. Yeah.
Right,
you cannot build more railways, not easily anyways.
Not easily. CN and CP Rail in Canada are our main two, and there's no one that's going to build a railway going from east to west in Canada.
No.
There's switching mode.
Yep.
A switching mode it can be actually a pretty sticky mode because people are lazy. So switching mode is like, I'm not going to switch to BMO if I'm at TD because it's just a big hassle.
Those are banks, by the way.
Yeah, those are banks. I'm not going to switch to Android from Apple because now I got to learn how to use the Android platform. Plus all my pictures and everything are all on an Apple device.
So is there something in the product or the service that they have that is very sticky? It makes it a pain in order to switch.
Right.
Yep.
Exactly. Switching mode.
Another example might be Intuitive Surgical. So for surgeons and stuff like that, it's a robotic surgical platform. Once you get trained on one surgical platform, it's really hard to want to make someone switch over to a different one.
People do not want to learn anything new.
Well, it's not they only don't want to learn anything new. It's a headache to learn something new, especially when what you've got is working okay.
Yeah.
Right?
Even if the other product is better, unless it's 10x better,
Right.
people are generally not going to switch over.
Yeah.
And we saw that a lot with Windows when it first came out. Like Mac was the big computers for a long time, and then all of a sudden when Windows came out, it got sticky, and everyone needed Windows in the office, and it wasn't really, Microsoft still is clunky. Microsoft is still not great, but we all still have to use it in office. Another one is brand. Obviously that speaks for itself. Something like Nike. So Apple again is
Coca-Cola.
a brand. Coke is a brand. Lots of brands.
Some of these will overlap, obviously.
Aritzia is a brand. So lots of brands. Tesla would be a brand. So brand mode, super easy.
And there's going to be some things where you don't care about brand.
Exactly.
You don't care if you get your gas from Shell or...
Oh, that's not true. We know one guy who does care very
that's
much.
fair. That's
gets
true.
his
Okay.
gas from.
Okay. Well, you don't care if you get your fertilizer from Potash Corp or CF Industries.
Right. And you don't, or something like envelopes. You don't care who's making your envelope.
Who cares?
Another one that we've come to really appreciate that isn't in the original list of moats, if you go back and do some research in moats, is the networking moat.
Yes.
So explain.
So a network moat is essentially a moat that we've determined means that there is a large number...
I've heard a lot of other people now talk about
Fair
it.
enough.
So it is...
So I guess it's not us, but
No.
but it's a moat that we would describe as an infrastructure where there's just a lot of people present. And by having a lot of people present, it adds value to that company.
So it's an example of something that would have a huge network moat.
For sure. So Facebook is one of the prime examples. So because Facebook has a lot of users, it gives the platform value. So if you leave Facebook, for instance, you lose the opportunity to access Marketplace and all these other things where all these other platforms where people are. Right. So you have to use their infrastructure in a sense.
Yeah. And network moat works against you in that way too.
For sure. Once it starts to go, then it probably unravels quickly.
Charlie Munger actually talked about another moat that I'm going to mention that I think is a moat, and I've never actually mentioned this to you, I don't think, and this was in a lecture we listened to, and it is, I've heard a lot of people talk about it, but it is first mover advantage moat.
Yes.
And a lot of people will say, well, first mover advantage isn't a moat. But Charlie Munger said in this lecture, if the management is capable and they ride the wave properly, it can be one of the things that keeps a company strong for a very long time. So now that we've covered all the moats, and there are probably more, and if there's more moats that you can think of, leave them in the comments for us. But how do you know if a company has a moat? How do you go about finding this information?
Right. I think there's going to be quantitative and qualitative ways to discern that. And so one of the qualitative ways to discern that is, has it been around a long time? Right. So, for instance, the railways have been around for 100 and some odd years, so they obviously have a durable competitive advantage, not only within their industry, i.e. railroads, but also they can compete with other forms of logistics, so trucking and things like that, so other means of transport, freight, etc. And so from that standpoint, do they have a long history? So I think we like to look for at least 10-year history in a company that we're looking at. Another way to discern whether a company has a moat is does it fall in its industry in terms of size? Either in terms of size or revenue or market cap. It should probably be number 1 or number 2 in its industry in order not to get kind of punished by the others, in my opinion anyway.
Now we're talking about wonderful businesses here. We're not talking about cigar butts.
No, that's an important distinction. So you might develop a different checklist actually for like a Ben Graham style investing.
Right, they would be looking for something different. Right. I don't think moats would be so important because you're just trying to get that final puff out of the cigar.
You're trying to look with our checklist, we should make a caveat. With this checklist, you're trying to look for companies that you think are going to be around for a long time.
At least 10 years.
And to continue to compound over time. So you're looking for companies with this list that you think are going to be around for a long time. The other thing to look for in a moat is this a company that I think is going to be around or has been around for at least 10 years, but is it going to be around for at least 10 years going forward? Because that company needs a good amount of time to continue to compound your capital to make it a good investment. So do they have a long history? Do they have a long operating history? And do we anticipate that they'll have a continued long operating history going forward? Yeah. So those, that's how you discern they have a moat, and that's what you're hoping the moat will accomplish.
Right. And the other thing about moats is some moats are stronger. Just like actual moats, some moats were better than others. Some moats are stronger than others. And oftentimes the best companies will have 2 or 3 or 4 moats.
Right. Yeah. So
Not
if you
just
go through that
one.
list, can you look at your company and say, oh, yes, well, it has a brand moat, but it also has a low-cost producer moat.
Those are
And
secrets.
it also has secrets to it. And
There's a
it also
network.
has a network. And so if you look at your company, can you discern those moats in your company?
Yeah.
That I think is important. Now, the other thing to maybe make a comment on briefly is that this checklist and your investment thesis is something you should probably look at revising constantly. So similar to when you're driving a car, right? You're constantly adjusting speed and braking, and you're looking for threats around you. In this scenario, as you're holding on to a company that you made an investment in, you're constantly reassessing. Do they still have a moat? Do they still have a durable competitive advantage?
Right, you're not just buying it.
You're not
and
just
then
buying
never
it and forgetting
looking at
about it
again. You're
Yeah.
constantly assessing
Yeah,
it, which
you're
is
constantly
why
assessing.
when we talked about last week, we said like to have 100 stocks in your portfolio as an individual. I can't keep
Yes.
track of 100 companies. I just don't have the time to do that.
Right. So that was just a bit of a sidebar. So the next point I think is this business in a industry, or does it sell a product that is slow to change? So think of a restaurant. Well, everyone needs to eat, right? So McDonald's has been operating for decades and decades, and the hamburgers are all
The
the same.
cheeseburger tastes the same from when I was 5 as it does today.
Right, and food people are still going to need to eat. Ad infinitum, unless there's some sort of technology that comes that I'm not aware of, where we don't need to eat anymore. I think it's safe that we'll still need to
That'd
eat.
be sad. I love to eat.
I do too.
Food makes me very happy.
So is it a slow-moving industry, or an industry itself that is prone to little change?
Right.
Yeah.
And are they Are they persistent in making products?
Yeah.
Right? Are they continuing to
Evolve.
Are their products? Are they still loved by the people?
For
Do
sure.
people still want their products? Are their products keeping up with the different changes that society has here and there? And you can think of vacuum, Dyson.
For sure.
Dyson would be now. Of course, Dyson's not publicly traded.
No.
But they seem to be evolving with their customer.
Yes.
They continue to bring out products. People love their products. People love their air wrap as much as people love their vacuum.
Right.
They are just a good company
Yeah.
at consistently bringing out products
Yeah.
that people love
Right.
and that are useful
Yeah.
and that make your life
Well,
that
and
much
as
better.
far as we're aware, that people are still going to have to vacuum their floors.
And
People are still going to want to, women are
they-
still going to want to curl their hair. Do they sell a product, or are they in an industry that is slow to change?
Right.
So I think that's something important to identify. If you're in a fast-moving industry, the moat can go away very quickly.
Yes.
I think that's the problem.
And that's one of the reasons why Buffett always says that they shy away from technology. I think his almost exact words are, a technology company thrives by cannibalizing itself.
Yes. Yeah.
And that's why he doesn't like it. When
Right.
he was asked, that's what he said. And that was a pretty profound statement, because I was like, he's right. Like, they literally are killing their own products in order to stay around. Coke doesn't kill its product.
Right.
Well, they did once in the 80s, apparently. There was New Coke.
Right.
But that was a big flop.
So that's a good segue to the next point, and that is, are the earnings of the company predictable?
Yes.
So if they're predictable, then you can slap a valuation on it,
And
which
if
is important later.
I remember talking to one investor one time. We were talking about Magna, which is a company in Canada. They make parts for cars on the most basic level of understanding. And he was asking me, well, what's their moat? This is way back, so I had just kind of started. I said, I don't know. And he said, well, can you show me their financials?
Yes.
I was like, sure. So I was getting the revenues for them, him getting, the statement of cash flows and all that. And he starts looking. He's like, okay, well, I can tell you that they have a moat.
Yes.
Just because the numbers are there.
Right.
But now you have to figure it out.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's a good point.
And that was very excellent. I always remember him saying that. And now when I find a company, if the numbers are there, I'm like, okay, this company has a moat. I need to figure out what the story is that goes along with these numbers.
Right. So, and that's the thing. I think you can take a top-down or a bottom-up approach to it. And so, as I mentioned before, moats are both qualitative and quantitative.
Yeah.
And so, I think it's both and, not an either-or proposition. All right, another reason the moat is so important is because if, for whatever reason, management starts to fumble.
Or they just make a bad decision, which happens.
Which happens. No one's perfect.
Yeah.
No individual or board is perfect. So if they start to make bad decisions, the strength of the company will carry it through.
Yes.
So I can't remember who said it, but I think it was Peter Lynch who says, you're looking for a company any idiot can run, because one day one will.
Yeah.
And he obviously says that from experience.
Exactly. And it's true. And those moats will keep them afloat until better management comes on.
That's right.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, that happens. You see really good companies bring on really bad management, and the companies will flounder for a bit, but eventually that management goes away, new management comes in,
Yeah.
and they rise again.
Well, funny enough, a current example of that is actually, no, arguably Disney.
Oh,
Maybe not arguably.
Now, that being said, I don't own shares, and I've never done a deep dive.
Nor have I.
But I kind of feel like
Chapek?
Chapek.
Yeah.
I feel like he kind of got handed Disney at a very bad time.
Yeah.
Like he got handed Disney like right when all the parks were being closed
Yeah,
for lockdowns and whatnot.
The funny thing that struck me was the transition from CEO from Bob Iger to Chapek to Bob Iger again within about 2 years.
Right. And maybe he really does suck.
I don't know.
I don't, like I said, I've never done deep dive, but at the same time, we've said before, I can't remember which investor said this, but they say you always have to look at what company was the CEO handed.
Yes.
And the thing is, he was handed a very good company, but the issue is he was handed it at a very, very bad time. Yeah. The counter argument to that would be if he was a good CEO, he would have handled it better.
So the point being, though, is even though Disney, ended up hiring a, let's call it less than capable manager, on the surface, again, don't want to take him to task too much, not knowing too much more. But the brand of Disney will carry on.
Right.
Disney obviously has a brand. They obviously have
network.
Mm-hmm. They have secrets.
Yeah,
in a sense.
Definitely. Yeah.
Think about this too. They in a sense have a toll bridge moat as well. Like it's very difficult for yet another theme park to come in and build another theme park around there.
Right. So they have a lot of moats.
Yeah. So I mean, and that's just one facet of Disney. Not But the point, we digress a little bit. But the point is, even though they have ostensibly bad management, the brand of Disney will carry on.
The brand carried through until they brought Iger back.
Yes.
Who was actually He
was very capable.
Yeah, he was, because he ran that company for a long time, and that company grew a lot and did very well under his management. Yeah. So I think we shouldn't move on from there into management, margin of safety, and then also we still have like the nitty gritty list to get to, where we talk about numbers and ratios and all of that. I think we've kind of exhausted moat and meaning for today.
So next week we're going to talk about management, how to evaluate management as best you can as a individual shareholder, and then we'll get into some detailed numbers of what we look at quantitative wise. Yeah. We spoke a lot today about the qualitative things that we look for, which are important, but next week we'll talk about quantitative measurements that we look to gauge those things.
Yeah, which is a little more detailed. Yeah. So thank you for watching all the way through if you're still here. And if you can remember to like and subscribe and leave comments, that would be really great for our channel. Yeah. We will see you next week.